One more thing before you go. Have you ever wondered what it truly means to be a successful, purpose driven, loving, and happy man in today's world? Or how to transcend the roles, the ego habits, and the relationship boxes that often confine us? In this episode, we dive into these questions with our remarkable guest, Scott Grace. Scott has made every mistake in the book when it comes to being a man. After all, his first role model was Tarzan. We have that in common. But through his funny, insightful, humble yet powerful manual, Mindful Masculinity, a book for men and women who love them, Scott brings solid wisdom, gently nudges his readers towards a more conscious perception of masculinity. I'm your host, Michael Hurst. Welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. Scott Grace is a highly sought after singer, speaker, workshop leader, life coach, and the author of 4 books and a stand up comedian who has opened for legends like Robin Williams and Dana Carvey. He has shared the stage with personal growth celebrities such as Deepak Chopra, Dr. John Gray, and Louise Hay, known as the spiritual Dr. Seuss. It's fantastic. You got to see it. It's on YouTube. We'll have a link. Scott combines entertainment, wisdom, and comedy to inspire and uplift. So join us as we explore Scott strips away misconceptions, embodied beliefs, and behaviors that no longer serve us, using his hilarious, self depreciating humor to show where he went wrong and to bring light in a new way that attracts people rather than drives them away. You'll walk away with insights on overcoming the innate drive to live up to expectations, transforming the inner critic, and embracing authenticity. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Well, thank you, Michael. What an honorable introduction.
Well, you have an honorable life if, as you have progressed through it, and you've presented to the world humor and insight and wisdom and all these valuable tools that you've given us. So thank you.
Yes, much welcome.
It's interesting. I kind of go, you have so much to offer. I kind of like to usually start like where you come from, but I noticed in your bio and on your website, you talk about, and I love this, especially the Dr. Seuss connection. Let's talk about the 9 lives of Scott Grace. It's a very unique way of putting life in perspective, sort of like a cat, right?
Sort of,
Kind of, sort of.
kind of, sort of.
Tell me where. I know you grew up in New York.
I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to college, dropped out, came back, and made my income selling laundry bags on the streets of New York City. And it was illegal. I didn't have a license, and I would get chased by the police. And during that time, I developed myself as an entertainer because I would say nylon jumbo laundry bags, machine washable. And it got kind of boring saying the same thing over and over again. So I would interject playful things like, "You've read the book, you've seen the movie, now buy the bag. The strongest laundry bag you can buy without a prescription."
That that's amazing. I have a note from NYPD, by the way, since Brotherhood, Boys in Blue. They're
Yes,
not
yes.
they're giving you a free pass now, so it's okay.
I want to tell you a little story. This is a side story, but I was out there on the streets and I got this idea to forge a note. It said, "Dear New York City police officers, this note is written permission for my son Scott to sell laundry bags on the sidewalks of New York City without a license. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, but a mom's written permission sure is. Hugs and kisses, Mom."
Oh,
I,
that's
I
that's
put
brilliant.
I can't believe I'm telling this story. So I put the note in my pocket and I almost couldn't wait to be caught next. I was so excited. What was going to happen? And sure enough, a few days go by and 2 of New York City's finest come over to me and they're about to write me a ticket and take my bags. And I said, "Hold it. I've got a note officially pardoning me from this activity." And I took it out, and one of the officers read it in police monotone. He just read it out loud to his partner. Nobody smiled. I thought, oh my God, they're not enjoying the joke. But he gave me back the note and he said, "This one's on Mom. Take a walk."
On Mom. That
The,
reminds me.
the,
It
the
reminds me of
next
Epstein. Remember Epstein? Welcome back, Cotter.
Oh,
Always
yes.
bringing a note in from his mom.
Yes. Maybe that influenced me. Anyway, to finish the story, the next day, a police car comes with sirens going, which usually meant they were after real criminals, something important. And so I didn't stop selling my bags. And they pulled right up to the sidewalk. They got out of the car, the two officers from the day before, and they said, "We want the note."
We want the note.
And
That's
I
funny.
realized that their sirens that they were playing a joke on me. They were getting back at me. And they said, "We told everybody in the precinct about it. No one believed us."
Oh, that's funny.
So
That's really
they
funny.
laminated it and put it on the precinct
The
bulletin
precinct
board.
billboard. Oh, that's funny. That's cool. You're famous. Yeah, that's brilliant, actually. And coming from as a cop, I love that approach because is so that job is so usually right by the book and just so
Yes.
you see the worst in people and you see the best people at their worst on a consistent basis. So I'll bet you brought a nice smile to them. So I appreciate that.
Mhm.
That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. So you moved out of when you completed that you moved out of New York. Where'd you go from there?
San Diego area. And from there, the Bay Area. And now I'm in Mexico.
That's a little kind of a loop or a large difference too. But I bet you don't get any
Yeah.
snow down in Mexico, but you got it in New York, right?
Oh, sure enough. Sure enough. And one of my mentors, and I wrote about it in the most recent book, it was a police officer, Richard Barty, and he quit police offering. I know there's a better word in because he wanted to prevent crime with love and creativity and poetry, and he thought he could make more of a difference than busting people. So he traded in his badge and
Mm.
he moved from Syracuse to New York City, and he became known as the D Train poet. And I saw him
Oh,
on the subway getting people to chant more hugging, less mugging, more hugging, less mugging, more hugging, less mugging, more hugging, less mugging. He had zero fear, and he put himself out, and he was very creative. And I we became friends, but he was really more of a mentor. I want to
mm.
do what you're doing, Richard. Not exactly the same way, but I want to be that free in self-expression, and I want to find my own ministry. I called him Swami Subwaynanda because a majority of his ministry, his service, was on the subways.
Oh, that's
And
cool. That's very cool.
he inspired me when I started writing poetry and expressing myself in rather unique ways. I mean, the spiritual Dr. Seuss, come on, it was never done before. And I would call on him because he had died. I would call on him as one of my spirit guides, you might
Mm.
say, and asked him for the courage to follow my heart.
That's pretty cool. That's a profound story, actually. I appreciate what you do in regard to that. I wish you were around when I was going to Catholic church because they're so monotone and boring. We wanted nothing more but to leave as soon as
Mm,
possible, kind of a thing. But you make everything
mm,
fun. I mean, you really do. You make it kind of you make it unique and you make it fun. So
mm.
yeah, that's cool. I know
Thank you.
you're obviously we said earlier you're a troubadour. You travel around and singing and so forth and stand-up comedian. I know you've opened for a lot of individuals across the country. How did you move into that? How did you slide into that?
Yeah, that was amazing. So I have the gift of being able to combine improvisation with messages and humor. So somebody like Deepak would get a hold of me because I would open up or close or both his talks, his presentations, his seminars with music that would come into my brain about what he just talked about. So I became known for that. And my voice isn't that great. My guitar playing is okay. But really, what I became known for is being able to tune into a person, a moment, or a subject and channel, if you will, the lyric, and I'd be happy to do it for you and your audience today when we come up with a topic and you can say, hey, sing about what we just talked about.
That's a cool deal. I'm going to hold you to that. I think
Please do.
that, yeah, I think that what a unique opportunity for you to communicate. I think music is and any type of music, whether it's verbal or just instrumental, I think music is an international language. And
Mm,
I think it all resonates with us deep within our souls and will connect with us in various ways. So, yeah, I'm excited to try that. I really, I am here. Um, Before we get there, though, can we talk about? I know that you had some corporate jobs before you went more into this creative aspect of your life, or in the middle of your creative aspect. What did you do for the
yeah.
corporate world?
Actually, it was very creative. What I did was the same thing I did for Deepak and Marianne Williamson and all these celebrities, which is I went to their board meetings, and when they had enough intellectual understanding, and they would turn to me and say, summarize in song what we just talked about, what the main points are. So yeah, it was the same thing I was doing in the personal growth arena. It just was that I had to wear a suit.
And this evolved into was this before you decided to become a stand-up comedian, or was this after
Well, it was during.
or during? Same time.
Yeah, yeah,
What part?
yeah,
I mean, obviously you combine music and you combine humor and so forth. What is your favorite? I mean, what do you? My brain's going like 100 miles a minute, so you have to give me a second. All these things just popping in my head, going, I need to ask this, I need to ask that, I need to ask this, and I'm thinking about
mhm,
what we're going to do for your demonstration because I'm excited about that as
mhm,
well.
mhm.
So, your stand-up humor was it always part of your work
Yes,
anyway from the beginning? And
yes. I was constantly writing funny songs and doing little monologues during my concerts, but it was in the realm of music. One day, I just realized the most terrifying thing I could possibly imagine was to do stand up without the guitar, and I'm really into facing my fears, so I did it, and it was very well received. And then I did it again and again and again and again, and fate brought me together with Robin Williams and Dana Carvey and a lot of celebrities. So yeah,
you know, I think it's a unique approach. My wife and I watch a lot of comedy specials, and we love going to live shows and so forth. I think you're unique in the fact that you do bring music to the show, and I think that that again kind of resonates. The combination between the humor as well as the music allows people to get a deeper understanding of actually, in my at least in my eyes, that you get more involved in the show. I think.
yeah, yeah. And besides the humorous part, I was writing songs about my own personal development. And in the audible version of my latest book, there's like a 3 hour concert of songs that pertain to the subject of men, women, relationship, masculinity, uh, personal songs. And I'll share a little taste right now of one of the songs that I wrote when I was in the question, what does it really mean to be a man? I was so, yeah. I was sold a storyline. Life is rough, so get tough. Go out and take what is mine. Stay in control. Get the upper hand. Show no fear, cry no tear. Learn to be Superman. Now that story is burning, going up in smoke. Can't live it any longer, 'cause I'm being choked in the pitch black night. I'm looking for my heart. The light may be coming, but I'm still in the dark. Moving out the old, bringing in the new, and walking through the fire between the two. Moving out the old, bringing in the new, and walking through the fire between the two.
Well
That's just
done.
the beginning. There's a
That's
lot of
well.
it. What
If
I
if I could clap, I would clap. So we're
Oh,
gonna do
that's all right.
this.
But the bridge of that song, I think, would be a nice lead in to a deeper conversation about what the book is about. So let me sing the bridge.
Let's do this.
Uh, all of, if I can just remember it. Moving the fire between the two. All of these years, prisoner of my fears, and I've been hiding my heart to bear it like I've been hit in my stomach's pit, and I haven't come up for air yet. But as I take my first breaths, my heart is put to the test. There's a lot of emotion to feel. Sometimes it cuts like a knife, but I'm committed to life. And I know that the blade is slicing to heal, leaving what is real. Now, in that bridge is the whole purpose of the darn book.
What what inspired you to write mindful masculinity? And tell us a little bit more about that because I mean we can look at it and think about it when you hear the world, hear the word mindful masculinity. Um, Help us understand what that means as well.
Mindful is usually synonymous with aware, conscious, being able to observe your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors without necessarily analyzing, interpreting, judging. That's mindfulness. Masculinity is this, it's the energy that builds worlds, that protects and serves. And when it's not working in harmony with a sense of purpose to help other people, it's an energy that can be destructive, that can burn rainforests and hurt women and hurt
Yeah.
life. So mindful masculinity, becoming aware and mindful of your true masculine nature without necessarily wearing a mask that the society and the culture tells us to put on, mask, masculinity, the way we were programmed, versus what is innate masculine energy like? How does it want to express through
Mm.
me?
Do you think masculinity over the years, over the decades, even or centuries, has masculinity actually? Do you think it's evolved?
In some people,
And some
there
people it's
is
still
this,
unfortunately stuck.
yeah. But I would say,
Yeah.
generally speaking, yes, very much so. More and more men have integrated more and more of their feminine side. More and more women are, in a sense, being forced to develop the left side of the brain. And I think it's destiny. I think it's really called for that we become more whole brained. And the left side of the brain is masculine. The right side is the yin, the feminine, the receptive side. And we need both for a happy life.
I agree with you. I think it's a misconception. I think in some areas where people hear the word masculinity. In that regard? What are some of the biggest misconceptions about masculinity that you may address in there? And like we just spoke about, I
Sure.
think we each have a view of what a masculine and a feminine is. I raised two daughter. Well, my wife and I both raised two daughters, and we did our best to make sure that they were strong, independent young ladies that could take care of themselves, and and were confident as well as uh, we think they're beautiful. But as
Aw.
parents, they're all they're
Mhm.
beautiful, young, strong, intelligent women, young women. But at the same time, some of the world that's around us are falling back a little bit in how that relationship evolves. So, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that maybe the book talks about?
Well, one is the shame that many men feel in regards to feelings. Uh, there's a taboo. You're not supposed to be afraid. You're not supposed to show fear. And of course, many men have trouble crying when they're sad. So, what happens when feelings are suppressed? That sadness, those tears turn into bullets. It turns into aggression. That's really, aggression is really unprocessed grief. Unless you need it in the moment for fight or flight with a real threat in front of you. There's lots of, being a sissy because you're in touch with your feminine side. The possibility that you can emasculate or be emasculated by what? By somebody, by words, that somebody can take away your masculinity, your identity. Not not happening. The idea that you have to overcompensate by becoming a workaholic or having that muscles have anything to do with masculinity. It does have something to do with courage. And sometimes that courage is expressed at the gym or in the office at work. But for many men, more and more, we need that masculine courage to be turned to looking within. It's such a wonderful paradox that our emotions are part of our feminine side. But for many a man, expressing them, getting in touch with them, takes a huge amount of courage. And courage is a masculine trait.
Well,
So the rules of the game are changing. It's not so black and white. Sorry, Tarzan.
yeah, that's when I read that. I had to smile just a little bit because I grew up with watching Johnny Weissmuller, and the we think of as the original Tarzan kind of a thing, and having to make sure I got to watch that every day, and it presents us a vision of what we're supposed to look like and what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to take care of women and how we're supposed to take care of our wives, and our daughters and things like this. But I think that we as a society and culture may I think we did a pretty good um, try at trying to move away from what the standard stereotypical masculine and feminine is supposed to be. Um, with what's showing up lately, without getting into a huge political discussion or anything along that lines, I don't mean for it to go that direction. But um, do you think that do you use humor and to tackle some kind of those topics like ego and relationship challenges and things like that? Because what I see coming out again, unfortunately, it came out virally just recently that ego and that just went viral with regard to masculine and feminine.
Yeah, there is a little bit of going back in relapse. Everybody who's dealt with an addiction has had some form of relapse, and it's part of the process. So if you can step back and look at the bigger picture, hey, we're evolving, and some people need to go back to the
Yeah,
good old days and see just how not so good they were.
yeah.
Uh, I I do write a lot about ego. Some people would say, that men have a certain male ego, but I'm not so sure about that. In the book, I write about ego through the perspective of Dr. Seuss, and I'd be
Mm.
happy to share a bit of that with you if you'd like.
Absolutely, please do.
Okay, so this is ego, not the Freudian ego, which is simply a sense of identity. I would define ego in this sense as the neurotic sense of identity, the part that is not working of your psyche. So it starts out like this: the ego will travel with you on this earth and be your companion for worser or worse. It pretends it's your friend, your bestest amigo, and it pours on the guilt. That's the beverage of ego. It's there to protect you, to help you be strong. So it has to remind you you've done it all wrong. You're weak and you're lazy and you don't have a clue. That's your drill sergeant ego trying to motivate you. Your ego wants you to be all you can be. So it gives you these pep talks all day and for free. but you always can get some relief from your pain by projecting it onto the others you'll blame. For that is the ego at its beastiest best. It nurses its grievances close to its chest. Republicans, liberals, your parents, your ex. The world is just teeming with folks to correct. If only those fools could conform to your ways, you could get on with life without further delays. The ego loves finding new gripes to complain about, turns molehills to mountains of yikes to feel pain about. Now, I'm going to stop because it's a 7-minute poem, and I want to go to the ending because it has a happy ending, and I feel like I want to bring balance to this conversation. One day when you failed and succeeded enough, you witness your ego exposed in the buff. You realize behind all its protective clothing, your ego's been hiding a state of self-loathing. And beyond that, you realize the biggest of deals. You've dreamt up the ego. It's not even real. So for richer, for poorer, in all kinds of health, you make a commitment to loving yourself. You realize the love that you searched for outside you is what you are made of and can't be denied you. So you let go your plans, your potions, your pills, put some logs on the fire and learn how to chill. Your old superstitions have gone up in smoke, like you can't rest in peace until after you croak. You no longer fear death, or for that matter, life, because you know that all matters are safe and all right. While resting in peace, you will soon be inspired to go out in the world with some newfound desires. Desires that spring from your heart and your soul. And wherever they take you, you're going there whole. Because the ego is now in the passenger seat. It lets down the window and takes in the treats. You're not in a hurry. You're going there slow. Because the journey's as rich as the places you'll go. Where you are going, you don't need to know, because the journey's as rich as the places you'll go.
I needed you when I was working the street, my friend. Oh yeah, there was too many egos. So many calls I could tell you about that involved ego and so what a brilliant
Sure.
opportunity for somebody to really have an understanding that they have control and they have a choice and they have control. That's pretty cool.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, what kind of steps do you think that men can take in regard to having a better handle, I guess, on that, and recognize that maybe sometimes their ego steps in the way of
Mhm.
communication and solving
Mhm.
problems viably?
Mhm. Well, I would say that the superpowers to develop are curiosity. Like if you could not take it personally when you're taking things personally and just go, oh, this is interesting. I feel my heart beating.
Mm.
I'm wanting to defend or be right. That's a sign. I think maybe this is ego, and develop a little sense of humor and detachment. And maybe the willingness to pause would be the greatest gift. If you give yourself permission and work it out in your intimate relationships. Hey, time out. I'm
Mm.
starting to feel worked up. I know this is my ego, and I don't want to come across this way. So I'm going to take a little space, maybe journal, maybe take a walk. Everybody has their
Mm.
way of taking space, and I want to calm my nervous system down so I don't come from this fight or flight energy. And then we'll
Yeah,
come back and connect again.
that's yeah. I think that's an opportunity for us to be able to open the avenue of communication in the right way instead of the wrong way.
Mm,
Yeah, that's pretty
yeah.
cool. Do you think that gives us from a relationship perspective, because we're talking in regard to that, do you think from a relationship perspective, does that then allow an authenticity in the relationship and how we can cultivate that relationship both, with our partner in ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, it's humble, it's honest, it's vulnerable, and it's real. And it takes the conversation from the head, which always is able to argue a different point of view, but the heart is where you get to feel people and meet and connect and be real.
Yeah,
And the language of the heart is inarguable. When you learn to speak with your heart, nobody can argue with you because you're just speaking on behalf of your or what's going inside, what's going on inside. You're owning it rather than spinning and sharing the spin and believing your own bullshit.
yeah,
You could actually become emotionally honest and say, you know what, my heart is beating right now. I feel a tightness in my chest. I notice that I'm wanting to defend and protect myself and make you wrong. This is not my highest truth. And I would like a timeout so I can find myself again.
yeah. I think that's brilliant. In my old profession, in working domestic situations, the majority of those, 98% of those were all could have used that advice right there in specific. I think that sometimes they get caught up in their own ego from both sides. They get caught up in their ego as to who's right and who's wrong, and there's
Mhm,
always has to be a winner and a loser and a winner and a loser, but there doesn't have to be a
mhm,
winner and a loser. It,
mhm.
it can be mutually resolved from those perspectives. I think, and communication is the key. I think so.
I have nothing further to add, Your Honor. That was brilliantly said.
Well, look, honestly, I wish I could have pulled you out of my pocket in many situations, because what you just presented to us a little bit ago was like amazing and just nothing short of brilliant. Um, do you think that we as men struggle with the pressure to live up to our father's expectations? I see a lot of that even in my friends, and even um, I guess I could also say maybe our daughters as well, because my daughter sometimes will say, "Well, I wasn't upset because you got mad at me for doing something. I was upset because you were disappointed in me," and
Mm,
things like that. Do
mm.
you think we try to live up to that pressure? What kind of complications does that present us?
I can only speak for myself and keep it on my side of the fence because there are people walking around here without father issues
Yeah.
that haven't been wounded by their father, and bless them. I wish I had a dollar for every dollar I spent in therapy working on my father issues. And I would say that he was disappointed in me. I did not follow in his footsteps, and he expressed his disappointment either in criticism or just by pulling away in apathy. And he cared about me, but he couldn't find the words. He just gave up, and it hurt.
Or does your
Yeah,
book and in your coaching, does that help? Can you help people through that if they are experiencing that themselves?
absolutely. All I need is a little willingness and when people come to see me, they're expressing willingness.
All right.
And if I have to call them on their bullshit, I do it as gently as possible. And if I have to shake them a little bit with words, I do it.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
tune in to what that person most needs. Over the course of even just a few minutes, I begin to feel and feel rapport and start to have a sense of what to say. I know what to say. I don't know how I know what to say, but I know just as um, songs and things come to me, there's something inside me that knows how to serve people the best way possible. And it's my favorite thing to do. I'd rather do it. Private sessions are more fulfilling for me than anything, any self-expression at all, any being on the stage in front of whatever. It doesn't matter. Like when I connect with somebody and they feel seen, known, and supported, that's what gets me up out of bed in the morning,
Yeah.
knowing I can do that.
What I know, coming from an entertainment background the way that you have, regardless, because you kind of still had it when you were still on the street selling laundry bags. Coming from that perspective in your life, more of a creative aspect, what motivated you to get into coaching? Did coaching come first, or did the book come first? The books, because you've written 4 books.
I had a column in a magazine called a magazine before I even wrote a book. And somebody in 1996 reached out to me and said, "Do you do coaching?" And I found myself saying yes, because I knew that I was here to be helpful and that I had innate wisdom and skills. They weren't honed, they weren't developed in traditional ways, but I trusted myself, and thus my first client was born. And then I started taking loads of trainings and workshops, realizing, hey, this is not just a side dish. This is where I want to go with my life.
And that's profound, actually, because a lot of us go through life that sometimes we don't always know what our purpose is or what we are here for. We always, every one of us, from a child, you start wondering, why am I here and what am I supposed to be doing? As we grow older, we always going to say, what am I going to be? That's why we dream about what we're going to be when we grow up. Did you ever think what would you would be at this point in your life when you were growing up and saying, what do I want to be when I grow up?
No, it was more like a fireman, an ice cream truck driver, typical childhood things. No, whatever I do, it was born organically and it surprised me every step of the way. But I don't confuse my self-expression, my career,
Mm.
with purpose. I don't see the two as
See that?
synonymous. And I actually have a funny story about that. I was at a Grateful Dead concert and I was wearing hippie tie-dye, walking around, having a great time. And it got really cold. So I went to my car and put on a sweatshirt. And the sweatshirt said Pinecrest School or something like that. Suddenly, people were not making eye contact with me. And I couldn't understand. And so I went to this person who was selling falafel and cabbage, and I asked for a plate of cabbage for $2. He filled up my plate just with cabbage. And I said, "Do you have any idea why people are looking at me strangely?" And he said, "Yeah, you dress like a cop." So I I just started to walk around putting the cabbage in front of me and offering people to munch on my cabbage. And people started to become friendly and ask, they and I went back to the cabbage man, $2 more, please. And I kept going back and I became the cabbage angel that night. And what occurred to me, which floored me, was I was living my purpose that night just as much as if I'm coaching somebody or, on stage with my talents. That the purpose has to do with extending myself, offering love in whatever form. Like Cat Stevens wrote, "If I ever lose my hands, lose my plow, lose my land, oh, I won't have to work no more." I realize I don't need a guitar. I don't need skills. I don't need anything. I just need the willingness to open my heart to people and care about them and want to make their lives a little better. That's my purpose. Whether it takes the form of musician, comedian, or
Yep.
coach, it just doesn't matter.
Well, and that's a wonderful purpose in life. I think that my purpose, I thought for the longest time, was to be a police officer, and that's what I did up until the time I didn't. And at the time that I stopped doing it, it took me about 6 or 8 months or a little bit longer to stop calling in stuff. That's my little story. I kept calling in stuff, and then because I got injured, and then of course I was forced to retire, and I would call stuff in and call stuff in, call it. We everywhere we went, I was calling stuff in. Pretty soon the guys were going, "Sarge, you're making more arrests now than you made on the job. Like, go home, put your feet up, and we got this kind of thing." But I came to
Mhm.
realize it is when I thought I lost my purpose. I thought I wasn't protecting and serving. I thought I wasn't serving the public like I wanted to serve until I came back around to what I'm doing right now. And my daughter, the
Yes.
one that nudged me out of my wheelchair to walk her down the aisle, is the one that presented that to me. and she said, this is what think about this. She introduced me to podcasting. Said, you ever hear of this? No. Yeah, listen to this, see what you think, and how you want to immerse that where you're at now. And I thought, I think I really like this, and I found that I haven't stopped my purpose. My purpose is the same as like what you're doing. My purpose is to connect with
Yeah.
people, to engage with people, and I've always done that, and it didn't
Yeah.
change. My Where I'm doing it from changed because I'm no longer a cop, but at the same time, I wasn't given the opportunity as a cop to talk. My podcast, I'm grateful for this podcast to be heard and viewed in 59 countries. I never would have achieved that working a beat kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So, but the purpose with me stayed. My purpose is to motivate, inspire, motivate, and educate, and to entertain.
Yeah.
That's my purpose, and I've never stopped doing that. So I asked you that question because I think that just reaffirms to those out there that are questioning whether or not their purpose is it, or if they're looking for purpose, they don't think that they've got one, is that there is opportunity, correct?
Absolutely. When you smile at a stranger, you're living your purpose.
Yeah.
When you're worried about what your purpose should look like, you're off purpose,
Yeah.
because that constantly worrying about whether you're doing it right, or living up to these heavenly ideals of being on purpose, that is a form of narcissism. In that
Yeah.
moment, your energy is going inside, and it's not extending. And so, yeah, it's a bigger picture than just what do I want to do with my life.
I agree
It's
with
a
that.
bigger picture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I you mentioned something earlier, and if I can touch back on it really quick, we were talking about emotional awareness. How does emotional awareness play in personal growth, and how can we recognize how they develop that? Because it took me a while to, and when I say this, it may sound strange, but when you work from a law enforcement perspective, I grew up in a dysfunctional family anyway, but when you grow up in a law enforcement environment, and that's what you are not allowed to show emotion. Well, you can't show fear, you can't
Mhm.
cry. I delivered messages to people. I was with somebody when they died. The last words out of their mouth were to me to tell their loved one that that's where one more thing before Ego was born, actually. Last thing out of their mouth was to tell my kids I love them, tell my wife I love them, my husband, my brother, my mother, my father, etc.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm proud of you and things like this. So, you're not allowed to cry with that person. You're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to, you know what I mean, in that position. So it took me a while to really recognize my emotional aspect of life that I had tucked away from there. Uh,
yeah.
so just and it took me a while to aware. And once I was aware of it, it allowed me to have broader conversations like I'm having right now. Do you think that plays a role?
Yes, it's huge. It's huge. And I teach emotional intelligence to men, uh, and give them permission to begin the emotional journey of personal growth, not just spiritual. It's messy. It's not an area where most people are in control. You don't control your emotions, you let them flow. Hopefully, you find mature ways of expressing them, or holding them inside without suppressing them, acknowledging them. But I like to just teach men there's four basic food groups when it comes to emotion: mad, sad, glad, and scared. I try to rhyme them to make it more fun. So that's basically it. You can boil it down to I'm always feeling something, and it's either mad, sad, glad, or scared, and maybe a combination. We're multi-dimensional when it comes to emotions, and it's like peeling away the layers of the onion. Anger is usually the protective emotion, and then maybe underneath it, hurt, which is a form of grief, sadness, loss. Then fear, then there's shame and guilt, and then maybe some embarrassment, and then maybe there's some love and appreciation. You peel away the layers of the onion by acknowledging, by welcoming whatever you're feeling right now. That's how to peel the onion. I acknowledge that I'm feeling, and then fill in the blank. And most people, not just men, have been taught by our culture that there is no difference between feelings and thoughts. So most people, you ask them how they feel. Well, I feel that Trump is going to do a good job. I feel like you're rejecting me right now. Those are not feelings. Those are judgments. They're thoughts. So I teach how to look inside your body for your feelings and keep this quiet when the conversation wants to be emotional connection.
Like I said, it's kind of an interesting and unique way of opening ourselves up a little more. Like you said, peeling the onion and opening ourselves up to possibility. And again, I think it also, I personally, I think that that also allows us to better communicate because with that communication and that understanding, it gives us the better opportunity for communication.
You betcha.
Do you think fear? You mentioned fear in what you were saying. It's a cool acronym, by the way. You heard me chuckle probably off camera. the how does fear? Maybe tell us some insights on fear. How does fear play into this, and how do we overcome something like that? Because I think a lot of people are just
Sure.
afraid. And I saw this in working domestic violence for as long as I did. Fear played a factor in that in many, many, many of those cases in regard either from one side or the other, or the fear of change, or the fear of losing their what they have, what they think they have, kind of a deal.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you have any insights on that and maybe how to overcome some of it?
Sure. Once upon a time when we were in the jungle, fear was basically just it came up when we needed it. There wasn't any projection into the future. I'm scared this might happen. It was just, oh, there's a lion. And the adrenaline would pump up, and you would have the energy needed to run or fight, flight, or freeze. Nowadays, we are much less likely to have real threats. We're not in the jungle anymore, but our nervous systems are still geared towards life being scary and constant high alert, terror level orange, and finding things on the news to freak out about, and fear of intimacy, fear of whatever. It's like we're plagued with fear. It's the human condition, and the first step is to admit it, to note it, to recognize it, to say, oh, this is the way fear is showing up right now. Shortness of breath, worrying about the future, going through worst case scenarios in my head. So being mindful of fear is half the battle. And there are many tools, but you can't use them until you are aware of how afraid you are. And this conversation about what to do is so nuanced and multi-layered. In one moment, I might decide that the best way is to move forward to, in a sense, conquer fear by not letting it stop me from doing what I feel called to do. In another conversation, it'd be like, Scott, it's not worth it. You don't want to do that. Don't do it. Let's get into bed with a good book tonight. If you spend your whole life leaving your comfort zone all the time, it's very out of balance, and it's crazy. There has to be a balance between acting with courage and taking good care of yourself with kindness and knowing your limits and your boundaries, and when you want to bust them, great. But you don't have to spend 24/7 busting your boundaries and limits.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think balance is a key factor in our health and our stress and everything involved in regard to that. That's why we don't sleep at night sometimes. Like you
Mhm.
were saying, it just plays on our mind. Get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and think about how am I going to fix this? How am I going to fix the world? How am I
Yeah.
going to fix myself? How am I going to fix my life? And so forth. And that fear of change sometimes, or that fear of the opportunity to be able to change that, or how am I going to do that, or
Mhm.
coming up with a solution.
Mhm.
So many things that run through us. Um, if I can ask, from a male perspective, how can men support their romantic partners and without the compulsion to? And I get accused. I won't say I'm accused. I am guilty of
Yeah, say it,
this.
say it.
I'm accused.
Guilty as charged.
Say I am guilty of this. Always trying to fix it. But see, I mean, I also came from a professional or from an environment in a dysfunctional family with two alcoholic parents. I grew up with the notion that I always had to fix something. So
Yes.
it, yeah, and it stuck with me, and that's probably why I was a cop.
Mhm.
So I thought I could fix stuff, uh, which,
Yeah.
which I did. I did in many many cases. But now that I'm retired, as long as I'm still trying to fix stuff. Still trying to fix it. Tim
Well, you're
Allen,
not
just
alone.
call me Tim
You are
Allen.
so not alone. Michael, there's with a romantic partner, I train myself and my clients to ask, hey, do you want Mr. Fix It right now, or do you just want me to listen and just hear you? And once a woman or whatever says, I really just want to be heard, maybe we can brainstorm later, but right now, can you just hear? I tend to put my ears on differently. Mr. Fix It has a certain pair of ears, whereas, let's say, just listening, where my job is to show that I'm present, to be present, and to let empathy and caring run through my body and maybe make a few sounds that express that, like, oh, yeah, that must have been hard. It's more of an art than a science, but the main thing I can say in this little brief time we have together is ask. Ask before you just jump into fixing something. That's a great way of stopping the momentum of unconscious fixing and making it conscious.
Brilliant. That's brilliant, actually. Choice of words. Choice of words. That's a good. That's a good choice. Um, when did you first write you've written four books, correct?
Correct.
So the what made you become an author?
I'm embarrassed to say this, but I'll say it. I had a psychic reading in Maui, and uh, one of the many things this person said to me was, "Of course, you should get started on your book." I had never even dreamed of writing a book. So she planted a seed, and I started to uh, journal with and underline the things that I thought other people would benefit from.
Hmm.
And it really took me 15 years to write my first book. I started it, and I just I needed more life experience. It turned out to be a memoir, mostly because the way that I teach best, the way that I learn best, is by hearing people's true stories.
Yeah.
And I took out a lot of the self-help stuff and just left it as my story, my journey.
I mean, I think what was the name of the first book, may I ask? I know you've got four of them. So, in your last one's the book about masculinity.
Yeah, the first one is Teach Me How to Love, a true story that touches hearts and helps with the laundry. The laundry, because for 7 years of my life, I sold these laundry
Oh,
bags,
wow.
and I learned so much about myself. And I threw that in the book, chapter one. I called it The Odd Job.
Yeah, that works. I like that. Yeah, all right. I like that. What inspired you to write the masculinity book?
I was a student, you could say, of men's work. Uh, 1996, I did my first men's initiation weekend, and it fired me up to take risks, to go for it. What are my dreams? How can I make the world a better place? And to not let fear stop me, to not let hesitation and self-doubt define my life. So I just joined these men's groups. I always, once a week, twice a week, I would go to these groups, and I learned how men operate differently, and our cultural training and what holds us back, and how we can break free from our cultural conditioning. So all of the knowledge and wisdom and life experiences that I learned from being a man in our culture It just went into this book. It was just time.
I believe that everything will come at the time it's supposed to come. And
Yeah.
I'm wholeheartedly believe in the universe presenting that to us, and it'll be here when it's supposed to be here. And especially in this day and age, I think that it's a perfect time for this particular book, especially what we just spoke about earlier in this program in regard to, times are unfortunately changing in some cases for the worse. Um,
Mhm.
what Tell us what Mindful Masculinity, a book for men and the women who love them. What are some things that somebody can walk away with that book?
Practical tools for how to deal with Mr. Fix-It, how to how to soothe and comfort yourself when you're feeling righteous anger, when you are insisting that you're right about things. That's a big male wound, and it's shame that operates in the shadow land that makes a man insist he needs to be right to feel safe, to feel valid. So there, a lot of the book is shame busting. Um, and basically, we all have it. And we had it in the Garden of Eden when we covered our fig leaves, our genitals with fig leaves. That was the beginning of thinking we are separate from the universe and that we deserve punishment for separating ourselves from the universe. So this is like deep, even
Yeah,
beyond religious guilt that we're talking about. And and then we come up with this idea that we can somehow be better than nature, that we can compete with God and create a world. We can cut down the rainforest and build this and do this, and we're seeing it
yeah,
fail miserably. We're living in the end times, and our evolution is being quickened and speeded up because basically right now it's evolve or perish as
yeah.
a species. And the book is about taking good care of yourself, developing your left side and the right side of your brain, thinking with your heart, not just your head. People can get a lot of practical tools and inspiration and encouragement. I love the word encouragement, Michael. It means to support courage. And so there's chapters in the book about encouraging yourself. What is encouraging self-talk like? What would it sound like if you spoke to yourself in the silence of your own mind in a way that made you want to do scary things and break your boundaries and go into new territory? Masculinity wants to do that. It wants to go where no man has gone before. It's pioneering energy. The masculine spirit is what put us on the moon. And
Very much so.
the feminine spirit said, please, let's put this money into taking care of starving children, taking care of the earth. That's where we need to. And both are equally important.
It's the yin and the
That's
yang.
It's the yin and the yang. We want to fly to Mars, and we want to take care of our beloved
Yeah,
planet and the people on it. And we can do it all,
we can do it
but
all.
we have to value both our feminine and our masculine energy.
I agree with that. That's brilliant. Um, I could talk to you for another hour. This hour has gone by so quickly.
Remember, I'll come back. And second of all, I would love to end by making up a song.
I would love you to do that. Let's do one thing real quick before we make up the song. Tell everybody how we
Or
can get your book, all of your books, and your coaching service, please, and where we can find it.
sure. Well, first of all my books are on Amazon. So you just look up Scott Grace and go to my author page, and you'll see all four of them. My website is where to learn more about my coaching and other things that I do for people. And it's scottsongs.com. SCOTTSONGS.com. And people can find me on Facebook, Scott K. Grace, my middle initial K. And I'm very prolific on YouTube. It's a lot of fun. You get to see the spiritual Dr. Seuss cut loose.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And I'll make sure all that stuff's in the show notes too, so it's an easy way just to click it and they'll find you from that perspective as well. This is one more thing before you go. So before we go, do you have any words of wisdom?
One more thing before we go. Take it light and take it slow. It's built in that you're going to grow, but it doesn't come from what you know. It comes from sinking into the flow and letting the undertow of God's beautiful ocean set you in motion to areas that are totally unknown. And you'll find yourself carrying a sense of home right into the foreign territory because the unknown is where there is glory. So just begin to write your story, and then it will write itself in good health.
Brilliant words of wisdom. Thank you very much for sharing. Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. It's a pleasure to meet you as an individual. Thank you for what you bring to the world, both joy and knowledge and wisdom and entertainment. I appreciate you very much.
Feel very appreciated and honored, and right back at you, Michael. In fact, I want to sing a little bit about you. Okay?
I'll take it.
I'm gonna sing about my new friend. His name is Michael Hurst. He puts his heart and energy in serving people first. He started as a policeman, walking a daily beat, till an injury took him off the street. But he didn't stay feeling sorry, sitting on his ass. His daughter introduced him to the wide world of podcasts. And Michael found a second life. He liked it even more. And everything is an open door. You learn from every guest. Your ministry is 59 countries blessed. It just keeps opening wider like your heart. So glad you had the courage to press your life restart. Every day you restart.
I am honored you brought tears to my eyes.
Oh,
Thank you,
thank you.
sir. I appreciate you very much. Thank you. And forgive my everybody. Forgive my little emotional
Oh,
ending.
Michael, people love it.
uh,
They love people. We want to connect through feelings. That's how we feel connected, and that's the best moments in life. I
well,
wish we can banish apologizing for our feelings.
well,
Maybe we
this
start apologizing for our thoughts.
this one's great. My thought is this made me feel good all the way down to my soul. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. And for
You're welcome.
everyone that's out here in the one more thing before we go, community. Thank you for being part of our community. One more thing before you all go. Have a great day. Have a great week, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go. Check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.